Hey, good morning. It's Saturday again. God, I can't believe how fast Saturday shows up, but welcome. It's the Multifamily Unplugged, number one radio show, Saturday morning for real estate investors, brokers, property management, and other industry professionals. Hey, this is where we're going to dive into some raw, unscripted conversation about multifamily real estate and property management, some current events that affect your business. Maybe you have even affected your business over the last week, or you're looking at things that might affect your business in the upcoming days. Two things that we always want to look at is raw facts, no fluff, no hype, that we get right in and drill down. Hey, I'm Mike Morawski. I'm joined by my co-host, C. Gordon Moose, who we proudly call Moose. Good morning, Moose.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm good. What's happening today? How are you?
Just another beautiful day in Chicago.
Well, it is, isn't it? Look at the skyline behind you. Holy cow, man.
You like that?
That's how we roll, isn't it?
Yep.
Hey, listen, it's good that you're here this morning. It's good to see you. Can you believe it's Christmas week?
Yeah, I know. A week from today will be Christmas Day, won't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
No, Friday's Christmas Day.
Oh,
But,
okay.
that brings up a good question. Are we going to be here next week? Or are we going to take the week off?
Yeah, probably not. I'll be traveling.
Okay.
Yeah. So just for our listeners, let them know that.
All right. Well, we'll tell them right now we're not going to be here next week, but we'll be here the following week. So listen, if you're out there, go tell somebody that we're on the air. Tell them that we're live on Facebook and that they could log in there or log in on Zoom. We got some great things that we're going to talk about today. Some crazy headlines this morning. If you have questions, comments, make sure you light up the chat box, right? So get that in the chat box so that we can get that stuff answered for you today. I know we got a couple questions. Carl, you got those questions from last week, right?
Yep.
We can talk about a little bit.
Yep.
So every week, my co-host Moose and I are here. We bring you over 50 years of multifamily and real estate knowledge and experience. So, hey, go grab your coffee, sit back, and enjoy the ride. You know what I always say, Carl? Are we living a ridiculous life right now? How's that going in your life?
Yes. And you know what I always say? Sometimes it feels like it, right? Unbelievable is the other one, right, Mike?
Yeah, unbelievable. My buddy Zig Ziglar used to always say, just say unbelievable. And that covers both ends of the spectrum, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Hey, how
right.
you doing? I'm doing unbelievable. How about you?
Pretty unbelievable.
Yeah. So, but anyhow, let me ask, are you living a ridiculous life? Are you living the life that you really want to be living? And if you're not, why? What's holding you back? What's keeping you from moving forward? What's keeping you from living that life that you've always dreamed of? You write goals, you set goals, you read them, you look at them, and you either achieve them or you don't. And if you don't, why not? Is it getting you closer or further away from where you want to be? So how do we help? You know what? We'll talk about some things here this morning. Carl, one thing I want to talk about this morning is self-confidence. I have some headlines about landlords. And we'll just kind of cover some of that. And I know you have a couple questions from last week. So, one thing I want to say is it's Christmas week, Carl. Are you ready?
Yeah, I know. It's crazy, isn't it?
I
Yeah,
know.
no, I'm ready. I got all my gift buying done. We're traveling the day after. So it's the tree's up. The decorations are on the tree. So, we're ready to go.
It's good.
How about you?
You said you're traveling. Where are you going this year?
Well, I'm from Cleveland originally. So we're traveling back to see my mom and my dad, my brothers and sisters and everybody. It's going to be different. My dad's birthday is on Christmas. So we're probably not going to see them too much because, they're 90 years old.
Yeah.
But we have a family lake house on Lake Erie. So they'll come out and visit. We stay at the lake house.
Okay.
Which is, it's interesting. And that's one of the questions from last week was, how do you get started? Right. And I just want to segue into that. My dad was a professor of economics. Right. And when he and my mom moved to Cleveland, they leased a house. Right. And it's a big, huge house. It's a duplex. And they ended up, they got into a lease option to buy. Now, this is back in the 60s. Right.
Yep.
So they ended up buying that house. right? Which they still live in. They paid it off years ago. It's, it's a huge house. We grew up there. Then my dad bought a house around the corner, right? They live close to Case Western Reserve, which is a big, it's kind of like the Harvard of the Midwest. It's a really good school in Cleveland. So he bought a house. He rented to Case Western Reserve um, uh, doctors and residents, right? When they would go there for the residency. And then he bought another one, right? And then he bought another one. And then he bought a lake house, right? So he ended up accumulating about 5 or 6 pieces of property over really about a 40-year stretch, right? And it's obviously all paid off and produces income and everything. But that was one of the questions, like, how do you get started? And you and I both say this about real estate, Mike. It's one of the things I love about real estate, and I know you do too. There's so many points of entry, right? There's so many ways to get involved, whether passively or actively. And my dad, if you ask my dad, are you a real estate investor? He would say, well, no, not really. But he owns 5 homes. He owns 5 pieces of property, right? And because he never really considered himself a real estate investor, right? But that's what he was doing with his investments. So that was one of the questions from last week, is how do you get started?
Yeah. So let me ask you a question though. Your dad's says he's not a real estate investor, but yet he owns 5 pieces of property. So, isn't that interesting? How people think. One of the things I wanted to talk about this morning was the landlord. You know, and how the landlord is being affected right now during these uncertain times, right? So, you've got this eviction moratorium going on, where the tenant doesn't need to pay rent because the government said that they can't be evicted if they don't pay rent. And you've got a forbearance that's going on for the property owner. I know you and I have had this conversation offline, but I really start to see that at some level here, there's going to be a perfect storm. And we're going to see that storm come up because we're going to have owners that aren't going to be able to pay their bills. Here's what I want to know, Carl. I don't believe that it's the big owner operator that's going to be affected. I think it's the little guy. The guy who owns 10 or 20,000 units, he's going to be okay. But the guy who owns, 3, 4, 5, 6 units, single family, a couple of small multifamily, they're the ones that are really going to have some issues, right? So listen, if I own a 2 flat in the city of Chicago and I'm not being paid rent, who's covering the water bill? And in the city of Chicago, the water and sewer is not an inexpensive bill to have. Who covers my insurance? Who covers the garbage pickup? Who covers repairs or maintenance? Listen, one of the tenants calls and the furnace goes out. Well, if I don't have any money coming in, how am I going to handle that, right? So these are things I think that the powers that be that are setting these rules and setting these guidelines are not looking at. And I just read in the New York Times that they are going to give more money to the tenants to cover the rent that they haven't been paying. Now, let me ask you a question. You know as well as I do that a lot of those tenants that will get that money are not going to pay the landlord the money. They're going to keep the money because they know that, hey, I don't have to pay rent because I can't be evicted right now.
Yeah,
Right?
and Mike, I know you've been through a couple of cycles. For people that are new to real estate, real estate goes in cycles. So this cycle, this downturn for the little guy, like you said, because yeah, absolutely. The insurance companies and the institutional buyers and the REITs and the Sam Zells and the John Bucks of the world, they're not going to get hit. I mean, they're going to get hit, but they probably have low leverage anyway, so that they can if their tenants are deficient, which means they're living there, but they're not paying the rent. They can weather that storm. But yeah, it's the little guy. It's the guy that may own less than 20 units. You know what I mean? And that was us. I mean, we owned 13 buildings at one time. And when the last perfect storm was, like around 2008, 2007 ish, you know what I mean? And think about it, that was about 12 years ago, right? And it goes in 8 to 12 year cycles. And here we are in another cycle,
Yeah.
different dynamics, right? Different dynamics. However, back then it was, they were just throwing money at people. We were over leveraged. Values were off. They weren't really based on income. Underwriting was, everybody was relaxed in their underwriting. So people that were buying buildings really didn't know what they were doing. So that was the perfect storm back in 2007, 2008. And we had the big housing problem. This is the situation now. And you're right. I mean, it's great that the government is helping people out. However, there's no control over where that money's going to flow.
Right.
And likewise, there shouldn't be. People should be free to do what they want. However, there's exactly. I mean, the guy that owns a six flat and the roof needs to be replaced, $40,000 roof, and he's got no income. He goes to the bank, and the bank's going to say, "Well, we're not lending right now. We're not going to give you that money." So that's going to be a big problem. Now, on the other side, Mike, on the other side, it's always a net sum game, right? So there's going to be opportunities. I mean, there's going to be some owners, unfortunately, there's going to be some owners that are going to get out of the business. They're going to get squeezed out, which means, if you're a buyer and you're in a position to buy, I think you're going to be able to find some deals.
Yeah, I think there'll be some deals coming up. It's interesting. And I think there's a couple of quick fixes, right? And one of those fixes might be, hey, instead of paying that money to the tenant, give it to the owner. Figure that piece out, right? So the stimulus money is going to come. I think I just read too that they just passed another stimulus, but it's going to be half of what happened last time, right? So does that, listen, $1,200 can't go very far, right? 6 is going to go even less. So, they've been going back and forth with this for months. So we'll see where it finally shakes out. But here's my concern. December 31st is supposed to be the lifting of this eviction moratorium, right? And typically, we know they're going to probably kick the can down the street again, right? So if they kick the can down the street again, it's worsening the issue. How much further can we do this?
Yeah, not only that, Mike, you and I both know, evicting somebody is not, first of all, it's not something the landlord wants to do. I mean,
right.
It's just not, and,
right.
and it's really a last resort. I mean, and I know you've done this. We've actually gone and said, listen, I'll pay you $500 right now. Just give me the keys. I'll pay you $500 as opposed to paying an attorney $1,000, just,
right.
If you just leave peacefully, I'll pay you, and for some people, they would take the money and leave because they didn't want to, they didn't want to be a problem either. My point is, it takes time to evict somebody in a normal set of circumstances where the courts are open and, they're having court every day. They're processing evictions on a regular, they're not doing that now. Right. So, even if they lift the moratorium on the 1st, they're going to get flooded with eviction notices. And that's going to take, instead of taking a month or 2 to run through the process, it's going to take 6 months.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not a good situation.
Yeah. So, I don't know that there's a quick fix or an easy resolve. They started giving vaccines now. A couple of, Pfizer and Moderna got approved for emergency vaccines. So that's going to be helpful, right? So that's going to start kind of moving the ball forward. But back in March, when they said, hey, we're going to shut down for 2 weeks, did you ever think that we'd be facing Christmas still being locked up and shut down? And, I mean, it's interesting where we're at. So,
yeah, well, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he said, we've been shut down for the whole year, and we're no better off than we were back in March.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's kind of, but you know what they say, hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
You never can know. But let's talk about how what that means for the multifamily space, right? And so, I think that people that are looking forward, that are looking to get into the market, I really do believe in the first quarter there's going to be some opportunities out there. And the question is, how do you find them, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you find those off-market deals? And here's a suggestion. There may be some people that are listening that are living in a 3-flat. If you're living in a 3-flat in Lincoln Park, or you're living in a 3-flat somewhere in Philadelphia, go to your landlord. If you really want to buy a 3-flat, start right where you're at. If you like where you live and you like the building, go and pitch your landlord and say, listen, would you ever consider selling this building to me on a lease option? They might say yes. You never know.
Right.
Or the building next to you, in your own neighborhood. Knock on a door. Go talk to a landlord. That's what my dad did. and he ended up, a lease option. And for those of you that don't know, a lease option is basically you put a contract on the property for a set price in a set period of time. You say, I'm going to lease the property for 3 years. I'm going to pay X amount of rent. And at the end of 3 years, I have the option to buy the property, and the rent that I've paid, I'll get some credit for that. In other words, that might go towards a down payment. There's a number of different ways of doing that. My point is this, if you want to buy a piece of property, look right where you are. If you live in an area where there's 3 flats, and you're living in a 3 flat, you like that 3 flat, approach your landlord. They're not going to evict you, or they're not going to look down on you for doing that. They might say, you know what, maybe I will do that. Or they might say, you know what, not this building, but I have another building. It's a 6-unit building. I've been thinking about selling that. So my point is, like you always say, Mike, get into action, right? Take some action, and don't let this situation, the circumstances that we're all in around the world, don't let this stop you, right? And what's the old saying? Napoleon Bonaparte used to say, I never see the circumstance. I only see the objective, right? And the circumstance must yield, right? Or the obstacle. His same saying was, I never see the obstacle. I only see the objective, right? Which is his goal. He said the obstacle must yield. So, this is just an obstacle, what we're in right now. This is just a scenario, a circumstance. Bob Proctor always used to say, who's my mentor, he'd say, if you don't like the circumstances you're in, change them. Successful people, if they don't like the circumstances they find, they create their own, right? So my point is, think outside the box, look around the corner, because, the other thing that we talked about, Mike, is for forbearance. How do you think the forbearance is going to affect the market?
How do I think it's going to affect the market? Well,
Yeah.
here's what's going to happen. Typically there's 2 kinds of forbearances, right? The first one is that the lender says, hey, listen, Carl, you don't have to pay your mortgage this month or for the next 3 months. But here's what we're going to do. When the market changes and we lift the forbearance, you have a balloon payment of 3 months of mortgage payment. Or that's one way they do it. Or they take that and they put it on the back side of the mortgage, which extends the life of your mortgage, right? So make sure that if you're getting a forbearance, that if your lender's giving you a forbearance, that it's the forbearance where the mortgage payments go on the back end of the mortgage, so that you're not faced with a balloon payment. Because if you're faced with a balloon payment, you're no better off than you were if you had to pay the mortgage every month. And yeah, I've seen some people recently get caught up where they had a forbearance that with a balloon payment coming due in 6 months or here in December. So now they're scrambling, wondering what they're going to do because their tenant still hasn't been paying them rent. So that's one thing to take a look at. Do I think forbearance is helpful? Yeah, it's helpful in certain situations, right? If I'm out of a job, if my tenant's not paying rent, if I can't pay my mortgage, then yeah, tack that money on the back end and let me get, let's just extend the life of my note. Do I really want to do that? No, not really. I think where you're going to see some problems here, though, is that when those forbearances kick back up, like the lender maybe gave you 3 months or 6 months, and now when those forbearances kick off, what's going to happen is you still have a tenant not paying rent, and all of a sudden now you're still back in the same position. So now you got to go back to the lender. So really what's important is communication, right? Stay in communication with your lender. If you're getting rents, if rents are coming in, great. If rents are not coming in, make sure that you're communicating with your lender. The one thing you were talking about was the opportunity that's going to be out there. And I believe that there is going to be a lot of opportunity come up here towards the end of Q1, beginning of Q2, and we're going to start to see it as we go through the year. But there's going to be opportunities, buying opportunities for, I think I've talked about it before over the last couple of weeks. I had a friend of mine who called up and said, hey, I have 5 properties. I'll discount them today. I had we had somebody playing cash flow with us last week who's got some property out of state from where she is. And she said, hey, you know what? I'll discount this. I want to get out of it. So, those are great deals. Those are some of the deals you're starting to see a little early panic, I think, with some owners. And, like I said, in most cases, the big operators aren't going to be as affected as much. So,
yeah. And, there's also, oh my gosh, what happened? What happened to me? Oh my God. What's going on? There we go. I'm trying some different lighting.
Boy, are
Wow.
you? Are
Yeah.
you?
Yeah,
Holy
exactly.
cow.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the other oh my gosh,
The
what's going
ghost, the ghost of Moose Past.
Wow. What's
Yeah, I feel like we're watching A Christmas Carol, and
yeah. Yeah, special effects, right? That was pretty great. All right, remind me not to hit the light switch anymore. That was one of the questions, how do you find a property? And the other thing is Danny Barrero, who we've had on the show, he's a really great landlord. He's got some, he really from the very beginning, he positions himself and he makes sure that he rents to quality people. And he said he's really not having a hard time with people paying the rents. But one of the things he does is he works with his people. So, if you own property, right, this was one of the other questions that came up, as an owner, what can I do? Right. Well, communicate with your tenants, I mean, go and if you don't own too many properties and you don't have too many tenants, maybe you only have 6 or 8 tenants, you'll go to them and call them, or maybe, go and visit them and say, listen, I know you might be having a little trouble, however, understand that, I'm what the position I'm in. And if they say, well, listen, I can't make my $1,000 every month, but I can pay 800, and then, and remember, they're people too, the tenants are, they want to, most of them want to pay their bills, and most of them want to, they don't want to fall behind, right, with the lease or anything else. However, they're humans, they have that fear too, right? They might, if you approach them, they might say, you know what, I've been wanting to call you and explain the situation. I can pay 800, but I can't pay 1,000, right? Well, if you don't approach them and you don't give them that opportunity, they might just act out of fear and not call you at all, and you never have an opportunity to at least get 80% of your rent, right?
yeah.
So,
Hey,
um,
let me just interject here real quick. And don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they're bad people, because they're not bad people. You are absolutely right. You bring up they're operating out of fear. They're having challenges the same way as everybody is, right? So the point I think the point we're trying to make here this morning is watch the opportunities, right? How many times have you gone and looked at a multifamily deal and the numbers were skewed for some reason, and you walked away from the deal, or you heard of people walking away from the deal because they thought, oh, those numbers are bad, when in reality, those are opportunities. They're buying opportunities. I've talked about the situation where I was looking at a deal in Des Moines, Iowa, and it was a 380 unit apartment complex. And the landscaping portion and all the numbers were skewed. When you look at an NOI, you want to see an NOI around 50%, 45, 55% of your effective gross income, right? So I'm looking at this deal, and the NOI is like, 30%. And I'm like, geez, are you kidding me? What's the problem? So I start digging into the numbers, because I think, wow, there's something wrong here. Well, the landscaping, you're paying too much for landscaping, and they're paying too much for payroll, right? So here's what I do. I ask the owner, I take a walk with the owner, and I'm asking him why the bills are so high. And he says, oh, he said, listen, you can straighten that out the day you take over. He said, I'm overpaying on the landscaping because my brother-in-law owns the landscaping company. I'm paying him extra money so I can pull cash out of the deal at the end of the year. Was a crazy reason, right? But it was the reason that the bill was so high. And I knew that I could get it down about $10,000 a year, and uh, put more money on the bottom line. So look for the opportunity out there. Don't get scared or walk away because the numbers are skewed or the tenant's not paying rent. What's the opportunity, and how can we fix it?
yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And you've got to, you really do have to, you bring up a good point, Mike. You have to look beyond what the seller's telling you, right? And dig a little deeper. Sometimes it just takes a little bit more digging to find that opportunity. But real quickly, just explain what and I know the answer to this, but I want you to explain it to our audience. Tell them what NOI is, because some people might know, and tell them what effective gross income is.
Yeah, so NOI is net operating income. Net operating income is the effective gross income minus expenses, which leaves you a number left over for debt service. Effective gross income
Well, hold, let me interrupt you just for a minute, Mike, because NOI does not include your mortgage payment.
does not include your mortgage payment or your interest.
Yep.
It,
Okay.
it okay, includes everything else, but what's left over is to cover your debt service. Correct. And then effective gross income is a result of gross rents, and your gross rents are if you had 100% occupancy, and then you took your vacancy factor and took your loss to lease. People say, well, what's loss to lease if I already took a vacancy factor out? Well, loss to lease is somebody who lives there and is not paying rent. Loss to lease could be a model apartment. Loss to lease could be a down unit, an out of service unit, right? So vacancy and loss to lease, because what you have is you have a physical vacancy and you have an economic vacancy. And people forget the economic vacancy sometimes when they're doing due diligence. And
So
you
explain that. Explain that, Mike.
explain what?
The economic vacancy.
Economic vacancy is when somebody lives there but they're not paying rent. So it's physically occupied. So physical vacancy is when you have a vacancy and nobody lives in the unit, right? Loss to lease or economic vacancy is when somebody lives there and they're not paying rent.
Right. And the
Those,
bankers call that deficiency, by the way. So it's the same thing.
correct.
And you'd rather have, personally, I'd rather have an empty unit where nobody's closing the doors or banging the windows or scratching the walls or using my water and sewage, than a deficiency or an economic vacancy, because you actually have somebody living there,
Right.
wear and tear on the property and everything else, maybe causing problems, and they're not paying rent.
Right, exactly. So you get effective gross income as a result of the gross income coming in, the vacancy, the loss to lease coming out, and then other income going in. Now, other income might be parking, it could be laundry, it could be vending machines, it could be loss, it could be uh, bad check charges, it could be late fees, things like that. That's your other income derivative, right? And then it gives you effective gross income. Take the expenses off of that, gives you your NOI. So if you looked at that on a balance sheet, that's how you are able to look at those things, right?
Yeah, and NOI is important, especially when you're talking about a 4 flat, a 5 flat, or up, because the NOI is really what the banker's going to look at. They're going to look at that property and they're going to look at how it performs. And to your point, they use some very general rules of thumb, like you said, 45 to 50 or 40 to 50% NOI. If the numbers first blush, the first look at the numbers don't look like that, the banker's going to go, there's something wrong. And by the way, if you see an NOI that's 70%, of your effective gross income, there's something wrong there too,
Yeah.
because the expense ratio is off, right?
Well, and I hate saying that there's something wrong, because it's not necessarily something wrong. There's an opportunity there, and we have to look at these things as some type of an opportunity, right? So
Right.
I,
Yeah, you're right. Yep, I stand
I,
corrected. There's nothing wrong. You're right.
I'm not trying to correct you. I'm just saying, I just think we need to look at these things as an opportunity. Hey, uh, did you have anything else? Did you have any more questions?
Not. I think those were the ones that we've had from last week.
Pressing. So here's I'm going to throw a word out there, and I just want to talk about this morning, because I think this is really important in people's lives, and it's self-confidence. So I want to talk about self-confidence a little bit. Hey, where's it come from, Carl? And are you born with it, or is it something that you develop? My belief is that we develop it, right? And so how do we develop it? Every time you do something and you're successful at it, it adds a little bit more to your self-confidence. It continues to build. And if you build on it and build on it, it helps you. I'll give you a perfect example, right? So when I first got in the multifamily space, I never thought I would close a 200 unit deal, but I closed 11 and 64 and 87 and 187. And it's funny how you grow and all of a sudden you're at 200 units, right? So the more you build, the little bit you build, set those goals. And when we set goals, set them attainable. set them measurable, set them with time constraints on them, right? So that you meet those and celebrate the little successes along the way. You know, something I always ask is, how hungry are you? Are you hungry? Are you hungry to achieve what you want to achieve? And are you willing enough to do what it's going to take? So are you willing to go get a new book and read the books? Are you willing to go to a seminar and invest in yourself? And I don't necessarily mean just invest in yourself monetarily, financially, but invest in yourself with your time. What are you willing to give up? Are you willing to give up that, watching Archie Bunker, okay, or that TV show? Are you willing to get out of bed a little bit earlier and not sleep in, or not go to bed so early? Are you willing to hustle a little bit more than the guy standing next to you? You know, there's that old story about the two guys who start at the railroad at the same time, and 20 years later they run into each other, and one guy's a foreman on the railroad track, and the guy's the vice president of the company. They both started at the same time doing the same job, and now all of a sudden look at the disparity between the two jobs, right? And the one guy, who's the foreman, said, how did that happen? He goes, well, I went to work every day and worked hard and had a goal and accomplished my goal, right? So I think self-confidence comes as a result of us achieving those small goals along the way, doing something different than somebody else would typically do, and pushing yourself forward. Celebrate the little successes along the way, because when
Yeah.
you celebrate those successes, you gain a lot more.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, Mike. Oh my gosh. In the book, I'm a
Come back,
big,
Carl.
yeah, there you go. I'm here. I'm, as you all know, everything I do is based on the principles of Think and Grow Rich. And in the fourth chapter of Think and Grow Rich, or the fourth principle, is called organized planning, right? And within that chapter, he has what's called the self-confidence formula. So he talks exactly about that, and he lays out the steps to build self-confidence. And you hit on a couple of them, right? And I'm not going to go over them now, but if anybody that's interested, if you email me at info@yourfocusguide.com, again, info@yourfocusguide.com, I'll send it to you. I'll send you the actual excerpt out of the book Think and Grow Rich. If you've got the book Think and Grow Rich, go to the chapter on organized planning, and it's right in there. It's called the self-confidence formula. And it's all related to self-image, right? It all starts with your self-image, which leads to your self-esteem, which will give you self-confidence, right? And he talks directly about that. And one of the things he talks about is aligning yourself with somebody that's doing something that you want to do, right? And you'll build confidence if you're hanging around with people that are doing what you want to do ultimately, because you're going to learn from them. You're going to listen to them. They're going to show you some things that they've learned, that they've done in the past, that could work for you. And that's another way to build your self-confidence, because when you're out there on your own doing it by yourself, fear, doubt, and confusion are going to come in, because you don't have a guide. There's nobody guiding you. There's nobody pacing you, right? And there's nobody that's showing you the steps to take along the way. So one of the key things is aligning yourself with somebody and networking and getting involved with people that are doing what you want to do, right? And you say it, Mike, all the time. Success leaves clues,
Yeah.
right? Well, if you're picking up those clues, you'll start to build your self-confidence, right? And your self-image will start to be elevated as well. So that's one of the key things.
Yeah. And so I bring that up because I think that people who are looking at the upcoming year and are looking to grow a little bit and want to do something different, and even if it's not just looking at the new year, but looking to add some goals and do something a little bit different, what are you going to do different? What are you going to do to educate yourself a little bit more, to dig in? What books are you going to read? What seminars will you go to? What coaching programs are you going to go get involved with? Carl, I just changed coaches, right? I just changed business coaches. I've had the same coach for a number of years. And what I found with my coach was that, we got to be friends, and he couldn't call me on my BS. So I went and I sought out another coach, and I have a new coach now who's helping me with my business development, my business growth, my prospecting, right? So Listen, I don't care if you are a real estate agent looking for sellers or if you're a real estate investor looking for sellers, you know, or you're a property manager looking for owners and operators, it's all the same. How do we develop those prospecting skills? And do you have good skills to find that business for yourself? So if not, go get a coach. Go get somebody who can help you get there. If your mindset's a little off, go get a coach, right? I know, Carl, that this year coming up, you've got some great programs you're rolling out. I have some great programs I'm rolling out. And I think that it's not about that. It's more about how do we help somebody, right? So I know I've got a couple of clients that have done really well this year and have had some great success. And, it's a result of them staying focused and doing the little things, celebrating the successes along the way, building their self-confidence. And all of a sudden these results happen.
Yeah. And the thing is, you look back, right? A year when you're looking forward seems like a long time, right? But when you look back, you're like, where did it go? Right.
Yeah.
And so, planning, that's why that self-confidence planning is with Napoleon Hill is in the organized planning chapter, because he talks about, having confidence when you're making your plan, right? And planning out what is 2021 going to look like, right? You get to say that, you get to create that because it hasn't happened for any of us. So part of that is, having a good self, having a strong self-esteem, believing in yourself, right? And surrounding yourself with people that believe in you, that are supportive of you, because that's going to help you build your self-esteem, which is going to lead to your self-image and your self-confidence. And making a plan. If you need help with making a plan, seek out somebody that can help you do that, whether it's a coach that you hire and you pay just to be, just for a week or two, or if it's somebody that's a 6-month engagement, that's not only going to help you with the plan, they're going to hold you accountable, and they're going to help you along the way, and they're going to bring their resources to the conversation to help you as well. So, you and I are both big on coaches because we've seen the benefit of having coaches, right? I have
Yeah.
coaches, you have coaches, and it really does make a difference. It accelerates your progress and your success, because when we're out there trying to do it on our own, look, in the background, I've got the landscape of Chicago, right? There's $1 trillion in real estate you're looking at in that picture right there, $1 trillion in real estate. And there's people behind those buildings, right?
Right.
Most of them, a lot of them are owned by institutions and insurance companies and so on and so forth. But scattered within there's people, right? And my point is, there's no lack of anything when you're talking about real estate. So as far as the physical, the bricks and mortar, what lacks is people's mindset, right? And if they're lacks in their understanding of how important it is to make a plan, make a decision, and get into action, and surround yourself with people that have done it before, because they will help you along the way. And you and I both have evidence of that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Hey, I was digging through some old books the other day, and I came across this is one you'll probably relate to. Ogmandino's book, "The Greatest Salesman in the World," and I was skimming through some of my highlights, and I've read that book a couple of times over the years, but I came across one of my highlights, and here's what he said. He said, "Most people don't ever realize their full potential because they let life sidetrack them." So, we'll be walking down the road, following our goal, following our dream, and all of a sudden a shiny object appears and we chase the shiny object, or we think that life will be better over here, or grass is greener on the other side. All those old cliches, right? When reality says that if you stay the course, that things will develop for you, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And when you say highlight, you actually highlight the book, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
listen, if you looked at some of my books, they're all highlighted, different colors, written in the margin, written all over. Hey, my Bible's the same way, you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
I just because there's so much good stuff that you want to go back and the highlights, sometimes you just go through the highlights. So, hey,
Yeah,
matter of fact, I've taken my book, the book I wrote, and I've read through it and highlighted it and wrote in the margins and dog-eared it because, you know, hey, listen, when you go back and you read stuff that you might have journaled, I'm a huge journaler, right? I mean, if you look at journals from some of my journals that I've written from, 5 years ago, and you look at some of that, you go, wow, have I come a long way? Or, the growth that's taken place. So I think people should journal. I think people should write because a life worth living is a life worth recording.
Yep. No, I totally agree with you. And I do the same thing, Mike. My library is full of highlights and that's the beautiful thing. Danny Barrero's got that he's got a gold nugget program. Those are the little golden nuggets that you're going to pull out of these books, right? And you're going to go back, and I do it all the time. I like on my desk there's always 5 or 6 books that I'm reading a little bit of this or a little bit of that, and I'm constantly highlighting and doing the same thing because that's going to help you. When you read about somebody else's success, right, and they lay things out for you, like Napoleon Hill was a genius. That book, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, it's a blueprint for life, right? And so when you read that and you say, oh, okay, this is how Henry Ford did this, or this is how Edison did that, right? And by the way, Ford and Edison are no different than you and I. They were born, they lived, they wore clothes, they ate food, they drank water. The only difference might be they may have thought differently, right? And you can work on that. My point is, when you read the books and the success stories of other people, don't let jealousy or envy creep in. That's a negative emotion, right? Think of it like, this is what's possible for me. Like, I can do this too, because at the end of the day, and you hit on it earlier, Mike, Bob Proctor used to say it's never a question of ability. If you find somebody that's doing what you want to do, it's rarely a question of ability, right? Now, there is the exception. I'm not going to be Michael Jordan or James, the basketball player James, because I'm not 7 feet tall.
Right.
I don't have that physical. But what he's talking about is on the intellectual and spiritual level, right? If you find somebody that's doing something you want to do, then it's never a question of ability, because if they're able to do it, you're able to do it. It's always a question of willingness. And you pointed to that earlier. Are you willing to put in the work? Are you willing to give what's required to get in return what you're looking for, right? Are you willing to weed out the distractions, right? Are you willing maybe to change your friends, maybe to change the people you're hanging around with, maybe change the places you're hanging out, right? And that's really what it boils down to, and that's how you build your self-confidence.
Yeah.
Right? That's one of the ways you do it.
Absolutely. Hey, we're like 45 minutes in, so we probably should start calling it a morning.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed this morning. We had a good conversation. It's been a while since you and I have actually shared some of this stuff and talked like this. So it's good. I'm glad we had a chance to get caught up. Hey, this weekend I'm taking my kids. We're going to go downtown and watch or look at Christmas decorations and buy ornaments and spend some Christmas time. So looking forward to that. That'll be nice.
Nice.
How about you? What do you got going on?
I am going up north to hang out with the kids. I've got teenagers, so I'm playing chauffeur to my daughter and my son and I, depending. We may go out and throw the ball around just because we can still do that. There's no snow on the ground. Yeah. But yeah, just typical weekend with the kids.
Isn't that nice? No snow on the ground. We had a little flurries the other day, and
yeah.
I think they're calling for like 30% chance on Tuesday. But other than that, it's rainy and clear. So
yeah. And then next week is Christmas, so we won't be on. Mike,
right.
Enjoy your Christmas. We're going to be traveling. Well, you and I will talk between now and then, but for sure. Everybody out there, really enjoy what you can enjoy, right? Enjoy the season, enjoy being, however you're going to be with your family or your friends.
Right.
For a lot of people, this is a depressing time. Don't get caught up in it. Keep whatever you can find to do to keep yourself positive, do that. Whether it's listening to music or taking a walk or reading a book or calling an old friend or writing out, Christmas cards, whatever you can do to bring joy into your life, do it, because the joy's out there. And don't let all this stuff that happened in 2020 affect you, because
that's right.
You can keep a positive mindset, and I suggest you do that.
Hey, shed the mask and move forward. That's what I say.
Yep. Awesome.
Hey, Carl, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to all the listeners. Happy holidays. You guys enjoy the season. We'll be here the day after, right away in January, the day after Christmas Day or New Year's Day. So we'll be here January 1st. We'll be back. I'm pretty sure that's Saturday, January 1st.
Yeah.
And we'll look forward to seeing everybody then. If you have any questions or you need anything between now and then, hey, reach out. You can find us on Facebook. You can email us. You can go to my website. You know what? We're here for you. So whatever we can do to help you out, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great holiday, Carl. Good seeing you, man. Merry Christmas.
Okay. Same to you, Mike. See you later.